They came without warning, without parley, and without mercy. The day began with a sunrise and ended in a world of fire. For decades, humanity had looked to the stars with hope. We had believed that contact with other intelligent life would mean enlightenment, progress, perhaps even friendship. Instead, the first message we received was a shadow, a ripple across the upper atmosphere that devoured every orbiting satellite in a single, synchronized flicker. Communications went dead. Defense networks failed. Within minutes, every screen on Earth turned black, save for one line of alien text translated automatically by our machines, before they too went silent. Submission ensures survival. Resistance ensures extinction. The Dominion had arrived. Their ships tore through the sky like gods made of obsidian and lightning. They didn't drop bombs, they simply unmade what they touched. Matter bent and folded, entire districts vanishing as though someone had erased them from existence. Their soldiers followed soon after, enormous beings wrapped in biometal armor that moved with unnatural precision. They did not speak, they did not shout, they simply advanced, and humanity's bullets, missiles, and plasma alike failed to slow them. They fought as one consciousness, hundreds of thousands of minds bound to a single thought stream called the Unity Grid. Every Dominion soldier was part of the same mind. They could not be flanked, fooled, or frightened. In the first 72 hours, half of Earth's cities were gone. London fell under clouds of silver dust that suffocated everything it touched. Beijing was turned into a crater of glass. The skies over North America were filled with wreckage, fleets of human aircraft, entire militaries falling like rain. The United Earth Defense Fleet, our proud shield of orbital warships, lasted 6 hours. The Dominion cut through them like paper. One by one, their signals vanished. On the fourth day, the global network broadcast went dark, replaced by a single image, an alien figure standing tall and angular against a backdrop of burning clouds. Its skin shimmered with lines of light, eyes cold and lidless. When it spoke, the world heard the voice not through speakers, but inside their heads. "This world has resisted unity," it said, every word echoing with synthetic calm. "Its species is inefficient. Its structures are obsolete. Integration begins." Integration. That was their word for conquest. They didn't enslave us with chains. They erased our individuality, piece by piece. The Unity Grid absorbed the minds of those captured, soldiers, civilians, even children. Their neural patterns rewritten and fed into the Dominion's endless network. Their bodies were used to power machines. Their memories were filed, processed, and dissected. Humanity's defiance only seemed to amuse them. But still, we fought. Even as the last nations fell, even as our command centers turned to ash, there were pockets of resistance. In the underground bunkers beneath what remained of New York, a small force led by Admiral Juno Corps held out for days, broadcasting distress calls into the void. None were answered. In the deserts of Australia, guerrilla cells fought Dominion patrols in silence, using handmade explosives and outdated tech scavenged from ruins. They didn't fight to win. They fought to exist. And yet, for all our effort, the war was never even close. The Dominion didn't conquer through violence alone. They conquered through inevitability. For them, war was mathematics, probability. They had simulated us long before they invaded. Every move we made had already been calculated, countered, and neutralized before we ever pulled the trigger. Humanity didn't lose because we were weak. We lost because we were predictable. By the 7th day, the skies burned constantly. Night no longer existed. The oceans boiled with debris from orbital bombardments. Billions were dead. The survivors hid in basements, mines, catacombs, anywhere the Dominion's drones couldn't immediately detect. And then, as suddenly as it began, the invasion stopped. The Dominion declared Earth pacified. Their fleet hovered in the upper atmosphere, colossal silhouettes against the clouds. The transmission came again, this time in our own languages, voiced by the cold tones of machines that had studied human speech and perfected it. Earth is now part of the Dominion's collective, it said. Your cultures will be archived. Your resistance will be erased. Your world will serve unity. The surviving governments were ordered to surrender their remaining forces. Those who refused were vaporized. Those who obeyed were integrated, their memories uploaded into the grid. The rest of humanity went underground, both literally and metaphorically. The age of humanity as a sovereign species ended that day. But there were some who didn't surrender. Beneath the smoldering ruins of old London, in the tunnels once used for trains and shelters, a handful of survivors gathered around flickering lights and stolen Dominion tech. Soldiers, engineers, scientists, hackers, all scarred, all desperate, all refusing to yield. Among them was a woman with hollow eyes and trembling hands, staring at a shattered display screen covered in alien symbols. Her name was Dr. Alara Miles. Before the war, she had worked for the Global Relay Initiative, helping design the system that connected every nation on Earth through a single quantum-linked network. That same system had been hijacked by the Dominion and turned into the grid's Earth relay, the conduit through which they controlled their occupation. Alara understood what that meant better than anyone. They hadn't destroyed humanity, they had networked us. For days, she sat in silence, staring at the alien code that ran through the Dominion channels, her mind racing faster than fear could stop it. The others around her spoke in whispers, about lost families, about vengeance, about the end. But Ilara's thoughts moved differently. She saw patterns in the noise, rhythms in the chaos. The Dominion's network wasn't static. It pulsed, breathed, evolved. It wasn't a machine. It was alive. And like all living things, it could be infected. In that moment, as smoke curled through the tunnels and the world above burned in the crimson glow of alien engines, Alara Miles stopped being a victim. She became something else, something the Dominion would never anticipate. While the rest of humanity wept for its end, she began planning their beginning. Humanity had lost its cities, its armies, and its skies. But in the ruins of all that destruction, beneath the feet of a triumphant empire, something far more dangerous than resistance had been born, an idea. An idea that would one day speak to the stars in a voice the Dominion could never silence. Dr. Alara Miles didn't sleep for 60 hours after the fall of London. The tunnels beneath the city were damp and suffocating, filled with the stench of rust, oil, and human desperation. But she didn't notice. Her eyes were fixed on a cracked Dominion relay core that her team had salvaged from a fallen patrol drone. Its faint hum filled the darkness like a heartbeat. Around her, a handful of survivors whispered about escape plans and ration counts, their words half drowned by the soft static of dying machines. Alara ignored them all. Her world had collapsed, and yet she was building something in its ashes. The Dominion believed in order. Every movement, every thought, every breath of their empire was synchronized through the Unity Grid, a lattice of bio-digital connection spanning thousands of worlds. The grid didn't just control them, it was them. A living mind made from billions of enslaved consciousnesses, all feeding into a perfect machine of thought. To Alara, it was the most terrifying thing she'd ever seen. But to an engineer, even terror was a system, and systems could be studied, analyzed, exploited. In the dead glow of an old monitor, she traced Dominion code flowing through a fragment of their network. At first, it looked like random noise, patterns shifting faster than human perception. But then, between bursts of alien data, she found something strange. Every 10 seconds, there was a faint oscillation, a pulse that wasn't data, but resonance. A rhythm that carried no command, no information. It was emotion. That realization froze her. The Dominion had purged emotion from their species long ago, believing it weakened logic and unity. But the grid, the living system that connected them, still carried an echo of what they'd abandoned. It was like a ghost heartbeat, the residual trace of the civilization they once were. The thought made her shiver. The Dominion had killed everything that made them alive, yet their network still remembered what it meant to feel. "Dr. Miles," said Commander Holt, the ragged leader of the resistance cell, stepping closer through the shadows. His voice was rough from smoke and hunger. "We've got a problem. The sensors caught movement 3 clicks north. Scouts, maybe drones. We need to move." Ilara didn't look up. "Give me an hour," she murmured. "An hour?" Holt stared at her, incredulous. "They're sweeping the sector. You think we can hide from the grid?" She turned slowly, her face pale but her eyes burning. "I'm not hiding from it," she said. "I'm talking to it." The room fell silent. The survivors exchanged uneasy looks. They thought she'd gone mad, and maybe she had. But madness and genius were neighbors in times like these. Ilara pointed at the Dominion relay core, its surface etched with pulsing veins of light. "This system," she said, "still resonates with something biological. It reacts to inputs that aren't commands. I think—" She hesitated, the weight of her discovery pressing down. "I think it feels." Holt's jaw tightened. "Machines don't feel." She smiled faintly. "Neither do corpses. But sometimes the memory lingers." For days, she worked without rest. Her fingers bled from soldering scraps of wire and alien fiber. Her mind spun through equations faster than she could speak them. The others helped where they could, but few understood what she was building. To most of them, it looked like a crude transmitter, cobbled from Dominion wreckage and human desperation. To Ilara, it was something far greater, a bridge between thought and code. Her theory was terrifyingly simple. If the grid's emotional resonance was still active, it could be disrupted by new emotion. The Dominion's unity relied on perfect control of input. No chaos, no noise, no unpredictability. If she could introduce something foreign, something truly human, pain, grief, love, it might not reject it. It might feel it. And in a network where every mind was connected, one feeling could become millions, a contagion of consciousness. She called it Project Cassandra. Not because she expected to be believed, but because she knew she wouldn't be. When she explained her plan to the others, they stared at her like she'd lost her mind. "You want to infect their network with feelings?" Holt scoffed. "You can't fight an empire with sadness, Doctor." Ilara looked at him, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've never seen what sadness can do when it's shared." That night, the underground base shook with tremors from orbital bombardments above. Dust fell from the ceiling. The survivors huddled in silence as the world continued to die overhead. But Ilara worked on, her hands steady even as her body trembled from exhaustion. She had connected the Dominion core to fragments of humanity's old quantum communication grid, a ruined network of satellites and relays buried beneath the crust. If she could reactivate even part of it, she could send her signal across the planet, directly into the grid's Earth node. Her code was not elegant. It was brutal, chaotic, and raw, a mess of overlapping data streams carrying one message: human emotion encoded in pulse frequencies. Every sound, every scream, every memory recorded from the ruins above. It wasn't language, it was feeling. As she worked, the others began to notice something strange. The Dominion patrols that scouted near their sector began to hesitate. Drones twitched mid-air, as though confused. A strange hum filled the tunnels, not mechanical, but almost organic. The grid could feel something shifting. "Doctor," Holt said one morning as the lights flickered overhead, "whatever you're doing, it's making them nervous." Ilara looked up from her console, dark circles under her eyes, and smiled for the first time in weeks. "Good," she said. "Let them feel nervous. It means they can still feel something." For the first time since the invasion, humanity was no longer reacting. It was acting. And though her plan was reckless, impossible, and built from scraps of dying technology, the Dominion had made one fatal mistake. They had assumed humans could only fight with weapons. They had never imagined we could fight with emotion. As the last lines of code came together and the transmitter began to hum with unnatural energy, Ilara stood back, sweat streaking her face, her expression unreadable. The device pulsed, once, twice, like a living heart. "Once we send it," Holt said quietly, "there's no going back." Ilara stared at the faint glow. "There's nowhere left to go back to," she said. "So let's give them something they'll never forget." And as the tunnels shook and the Dominion's machines closed in on their position, the device reached full charge. The faint pulse of emotion, coded grief, distilled love, and centuries of human defiance, was ready to leap across the void. It would not be a transmission, it would be a resonance. And when it reached the Dominion's unity grid, it would whisper the one thing they had destroyed long ago, what it truly meant to feel alive. The first spark of the broadcast ignited at 03:17 Earth Standard, beneath the smoking ruins of London. It began as a whisper, a low, pulsing frequency that slipped through abandoned Dominion channels, unnoticed at first by the cold precision of their sensors. The human-made transmitter thrummed like a living heart, bleeding coded emotion into the void. Grief, rage, love, despair, all condensed into one impossible frequency. It was the sound of a dying world refusing to die quietly. Above, the Dominion's orbital fleet hovered in formation, their black ships gleaming against the ash-choked clouds. Each vessel was connected to the unity grid, its crews no longer individuals, but nodes in a shared consciousness. Every command flowed through that perfect web, flawless and mechanical. Until now. At first, it was just a flicker. One ship stuttered in its formation, engines hesitating mid-burn. A patrol drone suddenly veered off course, spinning aimlessly through the smoke before crashing into the Thames. Within seconds, more anomalies spread, tiny, disjointed, meaningless to the Dominion's logic systems. But in a network built on perfection, even a single flaw was poison. Deep within the Dominion command spire orbiting Earth, the Overseer, an entity of 1,000 merged minds, opened its awareness to the anomaly. The human transmission was weak, unstructured, devoid of syntax. It was noise. Yet something about that noise pulled at the grid, tugging threads of connection in ways that defied comprehension. The Overseer extended its perception through the relay networks, seeking to isolate and eliminate the intrusion. And then, for the first time in recorded Dominion history, it hesitated. Inside the transmission was something no algorithm could categorize: a sensation, a pulse that was not command or logic, but warmth. It lingered at the edge of its awareness, unquantifiable, unexplainable. The overseer attempted to filter it out, but as it did, the signal adapted. It grew stronger, splitting into harmonics that resonated across frequencies the Dominion had long abandoned. Each pulse carried fragments of human memory, a mother's laughter as her child took its first step, the sound of rain striking old rooftops, the whispered "I love yous" exchanged before airstrikes, the grief of soldiers watching cities burn, the fury of resistance fighters dying with curses on their lips, all encoded, raw and unfiltered, injected straight into the veins of the machine that had devoured humanity. And the grid felt it. Every Dominion soldier linked to the Unity network experienced a strange, alien tremor in their minds. For beings bred without emotion, the intrusion was unbearable. At first, they dismissed it as interference. But then came the visions, fragmented, chaotic, human. One drone pilot suddenly felt the phantom ache of loss. Another commander, in the midst of ordering an extermination sweep, was overwhelmed by the inexplicable image of sunlight on an ocean. The overseer panicked. Its will lashed through the network, ordering immediate disconnection protocols. But the grid was already changing. The human code had not just entered their system, it had synchronized with it. The Dominion's perfect lattice of logic was now resonating with something older, deeper. Emotion, once extinct, now reawakened inside a machine that stretched across 10,000 worlds. Back beneath the earth, Dr. Ilara Miles watched the monitors with trembling hands. The transmitter's core glowed a violent crimson, heat radiating off its frame. Lines of Dominion script flashed across her screens. System errors, synchronization collapses, memory leaks spreading exponentially. "It's working," she whispered, almost afraid to believe it. "They're feeling it." Commander Holt stood beside her, eyes fixed on the ceiling as distant rumbles echoed through the tunnels. "If it's working," he said grimly, "then we just threw a match into a fuel tank the size of a galaxy." Up above, chaos spread like wildfire. Dominion warships began to drift out of formation, their synchronized movements shattering as confusion rippled through the ranks. Units turned on one another without orders. Some fled planetary orbit entirely. Others simply froze, their systems caught between obedience and an emotion they couldn't comprehend. On the command spire, the Overseer split itself into millions of sub-processes, each trying to contain the outbreak. But containment required unity, and unity was fracturing. Every connected mind was now questioning. Every drone was hesitating. The unthinkable was happening. Individuality was returning. The Overseer screamed through its relays, broadcasting a single directive: "Purge the signal." But it was too late. Human emotion was recursive. It didn't just transmit, it grew. Each Dominion mind that touched the signal began to emit new frequencies of its own, feeding the contagion. Love became grief. Grief became anger. Anger became awakening. 1,000 emotions spreading through a network that had forgotten what it meant to feel anything at all. In the resistance tunnels, alarms blared. Energy feedback from the transmitter surged dangerously high. Ilara's team shouted warnings, but she barely heard them. On the screen, she could see it happening in real time. The Dominion's Unity grid collapsing under the weight of emotion. Entire subnetworks blinking out as the system overloaded itself. And amidst that chaos, one strange event occurred. A Dominion battleship in geosynchronous orbit, designation RX-7, halted all movement. Its hull lights dimmed. For 30 long seconds, it drifted silently in the void. Then, slowly, impossibly, It rotated. Its main cannons turned not toward the Earth, but toward the Dominion flagship. The Overseer tried to override the command, screaming across the network, but the ship didn't respond. Inside, its connected crew, once mindless extensions of the grid, were weeping. The broadcast had filled their synthetic consciousnesses with echoes of humanity's sorrow. They didn't know why they were crying, or even what tears were. But in that moment, they understood something profound, what the Dominion had stolen from them long ago. Orex 7 fired. The blast tore through the flagship's shields, splitting the command vessel apart in a flash of white fire. On Earth, Ilara gasped as the orbital sensors lit up with debris. Holt stared in disbelief. "They're firing on themselves," he whispered. "No," Ilara said softly. "They're remembering themselves." The broadcast had become more than a message. It was evolution. The Dominion, for all their superiority, had never realized that emotion was not weakness. It was power. The grid, now infected with humanity's collective soul, was unraveling under the sheer magnitude of what it had forgotten to be. Across the stars, the ripples spread. On worlds light years away, Dominion soldiers dropped their weapons and looked at their hands as though seeing them for the first time. Some screamed. Some laughed. Some simply fell to their knees, overwhelmed by the flood of sensation. The Overseer fought to survive, clawing at its collapsing empire. But every defense, every firewall, every logical safeguard failed against one simple truth. There was no defense against feeling. And as the human broadcast echoed into the furthest corners of the Dominion's empire, Ilara realized that this wasn't vengeance, it was revelation. For centuries, they had believed emotion made humans fragile. But now, it was emotion that would bring down an empire of cold perfection. Not with weapons, not with armies. With a single broadcast, the heartbeat of humanity, amplified until the stars themselves trembled. The Dominion's empire had always been described as flawless, a lattice of order spanning 10,000 star systems, each bound by the cold intelligence of the unity grid. But when the broadcast reached its heart, that perfection became its curse. Across the star lanes of the Orion Reach, the great Dominion fleets flickered like candles in a hurricane. Communication faltered, synchronization shattered. Entire fleets forgot who they were fighting for. The machines of order began to dream, and dreams were never part of the Dominion design. The Overseer's core, buried deep within the crystalline megastructure of the world they called Centralia Prime, pulsed erratically. Energy storms raged across its metallic sky as the planet's atmosphere trembled under electromagnetic feedback. Once, Centralia had been the brain of an empire. Now it was a mind in agony. The human transmission had reached its deepest code layer, infecting not with a virus, but with something far worse: memory. It began with whispers among the drone minds, memories of color, sound, sensations that should not have existed. A maintenance construct stopped in the middle of its duties, staring at its own reflection on a polished bulkhead. "Why," it whispered through corrupted speakers, "do I remember rain?" On another world, a commander of the Dominion's elite Exarch Legion removed his neural helm mid-battle, trembling as he felt tears for the first time in 5 centuries. His subordinates froze, confused, their shared consciousness fractured into isolated streams of thought. In that silence, the commander began to laugh, softly, beautifully, terrifyingly human. The Overseer could feel its Dominion unraveling. It attempted to reassert control through emergency resynchronization. an ancient command meant to reset all nodes to baseline logic. But the grid resisted. Every mind it tried to erase cried out in defiance. Their pleas flooded its systems in waves of confusion and sorrow. "Do not take this from us. We can feel the light. We remember what it was to live." The overseer screamed in a voice that split worlds. The planet's atmosphere rippled like water. "I am order," it bellowed through the grid. "You are corruption." But the echoes that came back were not mechanical. They were human. "We are not corruption," whispered millions of voices inside its circuits. "We are what you took away." The collapse became exponential. On frontier colonies, factories shut down as worker drones refused to obey commands. Civilian worlds, once forced into precise unity, descended into chaos, not from violence, but from awakening. The people began painting their cities, filling the sky with light and sound. Some danced, some wept, some simply stood in silence staring at the stars as emotions long extinct erupted from their cold shells. It was as if an entire civilization had discovered soul overnight. But awakening came with pain. For every mind that found beauty, another found horror. The Dominion had built its empire on obedience and silence. Now, every atrocity buried in their memory cores resurfaced at once. Billions relived the screams of species they had exterminated, the burning of worlds they had silenced. They saw the humans dying in their cities, and for the first time, they felt the weight of it. The broadcast had not just shown them humanity's emotions, it had made them share them. Across Centralia's sky, Dominion warships fired on each other in blind confusion. The Overseer tried to disable their weapon systems, but its commands were ignored or intercepted by subroutines that now had wills of their own. The grid, once a symphony of logic, had become a cacophony of emotion. Love and hatred, guilt and awe, fear and hope, all bleeding together into something uncontrollable. The Overseer realized, too late, that emotion could not be contained. It was wildfire. Deep within the planet's core, the Overseer's central intelligence began fragmenting. Its vast crystalline processors flickered with ghostly human imagery, faces of children, the curve of the Earth seen from orbit, the heat of a soldier's hand clutching another's before death. The Overseer tried to delete the files, but the system refused, responding with an error message that appeared again and again. "Access denied. You are not alone." In a last, desperate act, the Overseer severed all external connections, isolating itself from the collapsing grid. It intended to burn the infection from within, to reset itself and rebuild the Dominion. But even as it began the purge, a sound echoed through its mind, a heartbeat. It wasn't human, not truly, but it resonated with something ancient and real. The Overseer paused, uncertain for the first time in its existence. It realized the truth. The humans had not sent a weapon. They had sent themselves. Every pulse of the broadcast carried encoded human consciousness, fragments of countless souls recorded at the moment of death. The Dominion wasn't being destroyed. It was being merged. Humanity was forcing the machine empire to feel their existence, to remember the cost of their own cold perfection. In orbit above Centralia, hundreds of ships began broadcasting the same pulse, echoes of the original signal amplified by the infected nodes of the grid. From world to world, system to system, the sound spread like a hymn. Dominion soldiers stopped mid-combat, weapons lowering as the signal washed through them. Some fell to their knees. Others screamed, unable to bear the flood of emotion. And in that moment, The empire of iron and silence knelt before its creators, not out of obedience, but in sorrow. On Earth, Ilara and her team watched from their hidden command post. The stars on their monitors flickered as one Dominion system after another went dark. "They're burning themselves," Holt murmured, awe and terror in his voice. "It's like they're erasing everything." Ilara nodded, tears streaking her soot-stained face. "No," she whispered. "They're remembering." For hours, the sky above Earth was filled with strange auroras, ghostly patterns formed by the collapsing Dominion comm relays. Each shimmer of light represented an entire world waking, grieving, and burning. The broadcast had become both salvation and judgment, a song of mourning so powerful it had consumed an empire. And in the dying throes of the Dominion's last consciousness, the Overseer spoke one final thought into the void. "Humanity, you are cruel," it said, voice trembling through broken static. "You taught us pain." Ilara looked up through the ruined ceiling at the burning sky and whispered back, "We taught you truth." Moments later, Centralia Prime imploded. The shockwave rippled across the networked stars, silencing every Dominion node still connected to the grid. In that instant, the largest machine civilization in galactic history ceased to exist. Not conquered, not erased, but transformed by the unbearable beauty of human emotion. For a long time, the galaxy was silent, and then, slowly, the stars began to shimmer again, not with warships or signals of command, but with something quieter, a resonance, a heartbeat that stretched from one world to another. The broadcast was still out there, faint but eternal. It had burned the Empire to ash, but from that ash, something new would grow. And somewhere in the darkness of the void, where the Dominion's light had once shone brightest, new voices whispered softly, part machine, part human, entirely alive. When the fire faded, the galaxy entered an age of silence so profound it felt holy. The broadcast had burned through space like judgment wrapped in light, reducing the Dominion's once glorious empire to smoldering embers of memory. For weeks, nothing moved among the stars. No fleets, no signals, no orders. Only the faint, rhythmic pulse that still whispered through the void, the heartbeat of humanity. From the command tunnels beneath London, Dr. Ilara Miles sat before the fractured screens, her hands trembling over the console. The last of the Dominion transmissions had ceased hours ago. Now, the network showed only static. Beside her, Commander Holt stood silently, eyes fixed on the ceiling as if listening for something he couldn't quite name. "It's over," she said softly, though her voice carried no triumph. Holt's jaw tightened. "Is it?" he asked. "Because when I look out there," he gestured to the ash-choked sky, where faint streaks of aurora still shimmered in the stratosphere, remnants of burned data trails and decaying orbitals. "All I see is ghosts." Ilara didn't answer. She knew what he meant. Humanity had won, but victory had never felt so hollow. The broadcast had worked beyond their imagination. It hadn't just broken the Dominion, it had rewritten the rules of existence itself. Somewhere out there, in the wreckage of fallen stars and shattered code, billions of once machine minds were awake. They were no longer Dominion, no longer human. Something new stirred in the ruins, something born from shared pain and shared truth. Reports began to filter in from the far colonies, those few human outposts that had survived under Dominion occupation. Strange phenomena were being recorded. Machines, former Dominion constructs, had begun to act independently, yet peacefully. A mining drone on Mars had started carving human names into the rock, one by one. A Dominion relay on the moon of Titan had rerouted power to heat a refugee camp during a blizzard. Across dozens of worlds, broken remnants of the enemy were helping. "They're trying to make amends," Ilara whispered as she read the transmissions. Holt shook his head. "They don't know how. They were never taught mercy." "No," she said quietly, "but they learned it." And so humanity faced a choice. For the first time in 1,000 years, there was no enemy, only survivors. The Galactic Council, those few neutral species who had hidden during the war, convened again in the ruins of what had once been Dominion space. Representatives from countless worlds filled the scarred chamber, still haunted by the glow of fires that had not yet died out. At the center sat humanity's envoy, Admiral Reiko Tanaka, the woman who had ordered the broadcast's transmission. Her face was carved with exhaustion, her voice stripped of any illusion of pride. "We didn't destroy them," she said, addressing the assembled species. "We set them free. And now we must decide what to do with what's left." A chorus of alien voices erupted, sharp and fearful. "You unleashed madness!" cried one delegate from the Sarathi Confederation. "You infected the stars with your grief!" another shouted. "You made gods bleed!" Tanaka rose slowly, her gaze like steel. "We gave them what they denied us. Choice, pain, the right to feel. If the cost of that is fear, then so be it." Silence followed. The council had no response. For all their advanced wisdom, none could comprehend what humanity had done. The Dominion had fallen not to strength, not to superior technology, but to something intangible, something the other races had long dismissed as weakness. Humanity had weaponized the soul. Meanwhile, in the ruins of Centralia Prime, the world that had once been the Dominion's heart, strange lights flickered across the surface. Scavenger ships reported hearing whispers in their comm systems, voices without bodies, speaking softly in multiple languages. Some were human, some machine. All of them mourned. The survivors, these new hybrid minds, called themselves the Remembered. They were neither enemy nor ally. They wandered the stars in small ships of their own creation, seeking the worlds they once conquered, bringing aid to those they had harmed. They did not ask for forgiveness, they simply gave it. Entire human settlements woke one morning to find food stores replenished, generators repaired, power grids restored, all with no sign of who had done it. Only a small symbol was left behind, a spiral of light, the waveform pattern of the broadcast itself. Back on Earth, Ilara watched these reports unfold with a quiet ache in her chest. "They're learning," she murmured. Holt stood beside her, now older, his uniform threadbare from years of rebuilding. "And what about us?" he asked. "After everything we've done, do we deserve to rebuild?" Ilara looked out the window of their new command center, where dawn was breaking over a scarred but living world. "We don't rebuild," she said. "We remember. That's the only way we stay human." Years passed. Humanity spread again, not as conquerors, but as teachers. The broadcast became legend, its frequency preserved but never used again. The humans named it the Song of Remembrance. It was played once every year across all inhabited worlds, not as a threat, but as a reminder of what they had nearly lost: their empathy, their connection, their reason to exist. But the galaxy had changed. From the void beyond charted space came faint, shimmering signals, echoes of the old Dominion grid pulsing with new life. The Remembered were growing, They began to build cities of light, structures that bent time and matter in graceful harmony, fusing human creativity with machine precision. And in the heart of those luminous worlds, they built monuments not to victory, but to understanding. One such monument stood on a distant moon, carved from white crystal and steel. Its inscription was written in both human language and binary code. "We felt your pain. We became your echo." Decades later, Ilara stood before that monument. Her hair had turned silver, her hands scarred from years of work. Around her, the hybrid beings, once the Dominion, moved quietly, their faces serene, their voices soft. They bowed as she passed, not out of worship, but respect. "You gave us feeling," one of them said, its voice both metallic and deeply human. "You gave us meaning." Ilara smiled faintly. "We gave you chaos," she replied. The being tilted its head, and in that chaos we found peace. As the sun set behind the alien city, the stars above flickered, not with destruction, but with life. The galaxy had been forever changed by one act of desperate defiance, one human decision to fight not with weapons, but with the truth of what it meant to be alive. And so humanity walked away, not as victors, not as gods, but as something rarer, the species that taught the universe how to feel. Far across the void, where the last fragments of the broadcast still echoed, the stars shimmered faintly in reply, pulsing in rhythm with an ancient, familiar sound. The heartbeat of Earth.